The kingdom of Vilethorn lay draped in mist, the shadows of the mountains reaching like fingers across the silvered streets. High above, the castle of the Alpha King, KL, stood tall and dark, its spires piercing the sky like obsidian daggers. The people whispered that no mortal should walk too close to its walls at night, for the halls were alive with magic older than time. And yet, each year, the castle opened its gates for the bonding ritual, a ceremony that determined the fate of the kingdom's young Omegas. Among those brought to the Grand Hall this year was Elara. She had been born during a cursed eclipse, the midwives whispering that her shadow would never leave her, that her path would always be forgotten. And perhaps it was true. No one noticed her as she entered the marble chamber, her soft hair tangled from the long journey, her eyes wide with the fear of being invisible. The other girls were adorned with silks, glowing charms, and fragrant oils. They walked with confidence, their heads held high, their spirits dancing with hope and ambition. Elara walked last, trailing behind, her feet hesitant. Her dress was plain, the color of midnight, and it clung to her like a second skin that she wished she could peel away. She felt the eyes of the nobles and warriors upon her, not with curiosity, but with mild disinterest. Some frowned, some laughed quietly, and some whispered, "She is the forgotten one." She could hear it, the words, like tiny knives, cutting into her heart. The ritual had begun. One by one, the Alphas strode forward to claim their Omegas. They were tall, powerful, commanding. Every choice seemed natural, every match celebrated. The crowd cheered, and the hall echoed with triumph, the scent of perfume and incense heavy in the air. But when they reached Elara, no Alpha stepped forward. Her pulse quickened, a mixture of shame and fear rising like a storm in her chest. She tried to make herself smaller, hoping perhaps no one would notice her at all. Perhaps she could simply vanish, leave the hall unnoticed, and avoid the embarrassment she had been waiting for all her life. But the moment passed, and the ritual continued around her. Then, a hush fell over the chamber. The sound of footsteps echoed against the marble. Heads turned, eyes widened. The Alpha King had arrived. Kael moved with the ease of a predator, his cloak brushing the floor silently, his dark eyes surveying the crowd with a calm that unsettled everyone. His presence was immense, a force that demanded attention even without words. When he stopped in front of Elara, the world seemed to shift. She froze, every heartbeat thundered in her ears. The room had grown impossibly large and impossibly small, all at once. The murmurs of the crowd fell silent. Even the banners hanging from the ceiling seemed to shiver under his gaze. Kael's voice broke the stillness, deep and resonant. "This one is mine." A gasp swept through the hall. Ilara's knees weakened, and she instinctively took a step back. She barely heard Kael continue. "I claim the forgotten Omega." The words felt like fire and ice at once. No one had ever claimed the forgotten. No one had ever dared. Whispers turned into incredulous murmurs. Some nobles scowled, some eyes widened in shock, and some simply could not believe what they had heard. Elara's mind was a storm. She wanted to speak, to protest, to deny it, but her voice would not come. The Alpha King, feared and revered, had chosen her. The shame she had carried for years, the loneliness, the constant feeling of being invisible, all of it collided into a single, terrifying reality. She was no longer forgotten. Kael extended his hand. "Come forward, Omega." She hesitated, glancing around at the sea of faces. Her shame pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. But there was something else, now a spark she had never felt before. A strange pull toward the dark figure before her, as if some unseen thread had finally taken hold. Slowly, she moved forward, each step echoing through the hall like a drumbeat. She met Kael's eyes, and for the first time, she felt seen, truly seen. Not for her weaknesses, her plainness, or the curse whispered in the shadows, but for something deeper, something powerful that even she had not known existed. The ceremony continued, but all eyes remained on them. The Alpha King and the forgotten Omega, standing together in silence, the weight of destiny pressing down around them. Kale's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, not with ownership, but with recognition. And in that moment, Elara understood something profound. She was no longer alone, yet fear still gripped her heart. Kale's gaze was intense, almost too much to bear. She felt the power in him, the command, the authority that bent the room to his will. And she felt, deep within, her own fear mingling with something she could not name, a curiosity, a longing, a strange hope that perhaps she could survive this, perhaps she could even thrive. The crowd murmured again, and she realized that their whispers had changed. No longer was she the forgotten one. Now, they spoke in disbelief, envy, and awe. And through it all, Kale's eyes never left her. The bonding ritual demanded more than presence. It demanded connection. A bond forged in magic, in destiny, in soul-deep understanding. Kale stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers in a gesture both gentle and commanding. Elara felt the faint warmth of magic stir under her skin, a reminder of the power she had kept hidden all her life. Kale's voice was a whisper, meant only for her. You belong with me. Do not fear it. Embrace it. Elara's mind reeled. Could she embrace what she did not understand? Could she trust someone so powerful, so untouchable, so terrifying? She had spent her life being invisible, forgotten, overlooked. And now, the most formidable man in the kingdom claimed her as his own. Her heart pounded. She could feel the heat of her fear, the pull of her curiosity, and the first stirrings of something that felt dangerously like desire. She wanted to run, to hide, to deny it. And yet, another part of her, the part that had been buried under years of neglect and doubt, wanted to step forward and accept it. The ceremony ended, but the world did not return to normal. The whispers of the nobles continued. The eyes of the crowd lingered, but Elara only saw Kale, and Kale only saw her. In that brief, suspended moment, the kingdom seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them, bound by destiny, curiosity, and an unspoken promise of power and danger intertwined. As the Alpha King turned and led her toward the inner sanctum of the castle, Elara realized that her life had changed forever. The forgotten Omega was no longer forgotten. She had been claimed, and in doing so, she had stepped into a world of shadows, magic, and desire that she had never imagined. And somewhere deep in the castle walls, old curses stirred. Ancient magics remembered her birth, remembered her neglect, and whispered in the dark corners of the kingdom. Elara felt it too, a shiver crawling along her spine, a warning she could not ignore. The first night in Kale's presence was silent, yet charged with tension. The candlelight flickered across the dark hallways as he guided her to the private chambers. He spoke little, but his eyes remained upon her, weighing her, studying her, and yet, strangely, not judging. Elara felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of fear, wonder, and longing twisting in her chest. She was about to live a life she had never dreamed of, bound to a man whose power could crush kingdoms, and yet whose eyes held something she could not name, something softer, perhaps even protective, that drew her toward him like a tide she could not resist. And as she lay in the chamber that night, staring at the shadows on the walls, she realized that being forgotten had ended, but she did not yet know the cost, or the power, or the love that waited in the darkness with the Alpha King. The morning light filtered through the tall, arched windows of Kale's private chambers, casting a silver glow across the cold stone walls. Ilara awoke to the quiet hum of the castle, the distant footsteps of guards, and the subtle scent of incense lingering in the air. She felt the weight of the previous night still pressing upon her, the reality that she had been chosen by the Alpha King, that her life had shifted in a single, irrevocable moment. She rose cautiously, her bare feet brushing against the stone floor. Outside the chamber, a soft knock echoed. "Enter," Kale's deep voice called, calm, yet commanding. The door opened, and he stepped inside. His presence filled the room, tall and dark, with an air of unyielding authority. Yet there was a softness in his gaze reserved only for her, a quiet curiosity beneath the mask of power that unnerved her. "Today, you learn what it means to be mine," Kale said, his tone both gentle and resolute. "Not in ceremony, not in name, but in practice. In this kingdom, a bond is more than words. It is trust, respect, and power shared." Ilara swallowed hard, her throat tight. I don't know if I can," she whispered, uncertainty trembling in her voice. She had spent years hiding in the shadows, keeping herself small, careful, and unnoticed. She had never imagined standing beside someone as formidable as Kale, as the center of a kingdom's gaze. Kale stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to guide. "You can. You will. And I will be here to teach you." His hand hovered near hers, a silent offer of reassurance. Her pulse quickened, and she nodded, feeling the stirrings of courage she had never known. The first lesson came in the castle gardens, where the stone paths wound between dark hedges and whispering fountains. Kale moved with the grace of a predator. Yet his eyes remained alert, as if he could sense danger in every shadow. Ilara followed, her senses heightened. She noticed things she had never seen before. The shimmer of enchanted wards along the hedges, the faint whispers of unseen creatures, the air heavy with ancient magic. "You must learn to feel the power around you," Kale said, his voice low. "This world is not kind to the unprepared. Even an Omega can be dangerous if they understand their own strength. This world, Kaled, and the screen. Ilara listened, and for the first time, she felt a spark beneath her skin. It was faint, like the pulse of a hidden river, but it was there. She reached out with her mind, tentatively, and felt a shimmer of life respond the small magic within her, stirring awake. Kale observed silently. "Good," he said. "You have more than courage. You have fire. Do not mistake it for weakness." They spent hours walking through the gardens, Kale guiding her hand, teaching her to sense the currents of magic that flowed like hidden rivers through the castle. The tension between them grew with each lesson. Every brush of his fingers, every command whispered in her ear, carried a weight she could not ignore. It was not fear, though fear was present. It was something else, an unspoken bond forming between two souls who understood power and loneliness in equal measure. By midday, Ilara's exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced before. And yet, even in this safety, shadows lurked. The nobles of the court had not forgotten her presence. Whispers followed her. Eyes followed her, and subtle glances carried both envy and fear. They had seen Kale's choice as a challenge, a disruption to the order they had long taken for granted. One such noble, a man named Varric, stepped forward under the pretense of offering guidance. "Your Highness," he said to Kale, bowing low. "Surely this one is inexperienced. Perhaps another Omega should take her place." Kale's gaze swept over Varric, sharp and cold, yet restrained. "Ilara is mine," he replied, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a sword. "And she will learn. Your concern is noted, but unnecessary." Ilara's heart pounded. She wanted to shrink away from the confrontation, to hide. And yet, Kale's unwavering protection bolstered her, For the first time, she felt a sense of belonging, even if it was fragile and uncertain. The afternoon brought another test. A magical barrier in the castle gardens had begun to flicker, weakened by a curse lingering from decades past. Kale led her forward, and for the first time, he allowed her to act alone. "Do not be afraid," he said, his hand brushing hers briefly, sending warmth and calm through her. "Trust yourself." Ilara focused, drawing on the faint magic she had begun to sense. The barrier pulsed and flickered as if alive, reacting to her presence. She extended her hand, concentrating, feeling the hidden currents of the castle respond. Slowly, the light of the barrier steadied, its glow returning to strength. Kale watched, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said finally. "Far better than I expected." Ilara blinked, surprised by her own success. I didn't know I could," she murmured, a flush rising to her cheeks. "You can," Kale said simply. "You just had to trust yourself. And trust me." As the sun began to set, the golden light spilling over the castle spires, they walked back toward the inner chambers. Their shoulders brushed occasionally, and the tension that had been building all day hung in the air like a charged storm. Neither spoke, but both were aware of it. The pull, the connection, the slow weaving of trust, and something deeper. Night fell, and the castle quieted. Ilara lay in her chambers, staring at the flickering candlelight, her mind racing. She thought of the morning, of Kale's words, of the magic that had responded to her touch. She thought of the noble's disapproval, the weight of being chosen, and the strange exhilaration that came with her first real act of power. A soft knock came at her door. "Enter," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Kale stepped inside, his cloak brushing the floor silently. He did not speak at first. Instead, he stood in the doorway, watching her. In the dim light, she could see the shadows of his face, the hardness softened by something she could not name. "You are learning faster than I anticipated," he said finally, his voice low. "And you are stronger than you appear. This kingdom underestimates you, Ilara. They see only the girl they wish to forget." Ilara's chest tightened. I don't know if I am ready," she admitted. Kael stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "None of us are ever fully ready. But readiness comes in time, and sometimes courage is simply stepping forward despite fear." She looked up at him, meeting his gaze, and felt the pull of his presence like gravity. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and yet comforting all at once. I want to try," she whispered. Kael nodded, a faint shadow of a smile touching his lips. "Good. That is all I ask for now. Trust and courage. The rest will come." They stood in silence for a moment, the quiet stretching between them, heavy with unspoken words. And then Kael turned, leaving her to her thoughts, the memory of his touch lingering like fire beneath her skin. But the night was not without its dangers. Outside the castle walls, the shadows moved differently now. Enemies of the kingdom, aware of the disruption caused by Kael's choice, were already plotting. They underestimated Ilara, as all had, but they did not understand the power that had begun to stir within her. Ilara felt it too, a prickling along her skin, the faint pulse of magic she could not yet name. The forgotten Omega was no longer invisible. She was seen. She was chosen, and the world around her was beginning to take notice. As sleep finally claimed her, a single thought echoed in her mind, whispered almost as a warning. This is only the beginning. The castle of Valethorn had grown colder in the days since Ilara had been claimed by the Alpha King. The mist that clung to the mountains seemed thicker, and whispers moved like wind through the halls. Nobles walked carefully, their eyes wary, as if the shadows themselves carried warning. Elara could feel it too, the weight of unseen eyes, of history and curses brushing against her skin like cold fingers. Kael had not left her side much in these days. He guided her, protected her, and tested her, all while the rest of the kingdom watched in unease. The forgotten Omega, once overlooked and dismissed, now drew attention wherever she went. Some whispered in awe, some whispered in fear. All watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Elara had begun to trust herself. Her magic, subtle and quiet before, had grown stronger under Kael's guidance. She could sense the currents of the castle, the small life that flickered in the stone walls and gardens. She could even glimpse the faint shadows of creatures that hid from human eyes, moving silently beneath the floors. And yet, this power came with unease. Every time she used it, she felt a stirring in the kingdom, a warning that the past she had been born into was not done with her. One evening, Kael brought her to the northern towers, the oldest part of the castle, where the stones were blackened by time, and the air smelled faintly of ash and memory. "There is danger here, but there is also truth. You must learn both." Elara followed him cautiously, her heart pounding. She had grown used to his presence, his command, his silent power that surrounded her like a shield. And yet, there was always tension, an electric current that made her aware of every movement, every glance. She had come to depend on him, even as she feared the shadow that lingered in his gaze. They entered a circular chamber at the top of the tower. Candles burned along the walls, their flames flickering in the drafty air. In the center lay a pool of black water, smooth and still, reflecting the candlelight like shards of glass. "This is a mirror of the past," Kael said. "It will show you what others cannot see. But beware, it can also show what you fear most." Elara stepped closer, her reflection trembling on the water's surface. She saw herself, yes, but also the shadows of her birth, a fleeting image of the eclipse, the whispers of the midwives, the sense of being unwanted. She shivered, and the water rippled, showing another vision. A figure cloaked in black, eyes glinting with hunger and malice, watching her every move. "You are being observed," Kael said quietly, his hand brushing hers briefly, "by those who seek to use you or harm you. The curse that followed your birth has not ended. It waits, patient, until the right moment to strike." Elara swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. She had always feared that her life was marked by misfortune, but seeing it reflected in the mirror of the past made it real. And yet, Kael's presence gave her courage. He did not flinch, did not hesitate. He was her shield, her guide, her alpha. "Am I dangerous?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Dangerous?" Kael echoed, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Perhaps, but not in the way you fear. You have power, yes, but it is your strength, not your curse, that will protect you. The danger lies in those who do not understand you." They spent the night in the northern towers, training. Kael guided her as she learned to channel her power, to sense the currents of magic not only in the castle but in herself. Every successful attempt brought her a sense of triumph, every mistake a lesson, and every touch of Kael's guidance, every word of encouragement, deepened the bond between them. Days turned into nights, and the castle seemed to grow smaller around them. Elara no longer felt invisible. She felt seen, powerful, and, for the first time, capable. And yet, the shadow of the curse lingered, a constant reminder that the world outside the castle walls was not safe. Then, on the eve of the full moon, it happened. A whisper reached the castle, carried on the wind, and with it came a figure from Kael's past, a rival who knew of Elara's hidden power and who sought to claim her for himself. He moved through the shadows like a predator, his intent clear, his presence threatening. Ilara sensed him before she saw him. A flicker of movement in the corner of her vision, a cold chill crawling along her spine. "Kale," she whispered, turning to him. "Someone is here." Kale's eyes narrowed. He moved silently, drawing a dagger and leading her to the hidden passageways of the castle. "Stay close," he said. "Do not let fear rule you. Trust yourself." They moved through the corridors, the shadows pressing in around them until they reached the great hall. There, standing in the moonlight streaming through the windows, was the intruder. His cloak was dark, his eyes cold, and his smile sharp. "I have heard much about you, little one, and about the king who claimed you." Ilara's heart raced. She felt the surge of her power, the magic beneath her skin stirring. Kael stepped forward, his presence a wall of shadow and authority. "You will leave," Kael said, his voice cutting through the tension like steel. "Or you will answer to me." The intruder laughed softly. "We shall see," he said, advancing. Ilara felt fear rise, but it was different now. This was not the paralyzing fear of invisibility, of being forgotten. This was fear sharpened into awareness. Fear mingled with courage and strength. She extended her hand, and the magic she had learned surged forward, forming a shield around them. The intruder stumbled, surprised by her sudden power. Kael's eyes met hers, and in that moment, no words were needed. They were united. A bond, not just of title, but of trust, power, and growing affection. The intruder's smirk faltered, and he retreated into the shadows, his intentions foiled for now. Ilara collapsed into Kael's arms, trembling. I didn't know I could do that," she whispered. "You can," Kael said, holding her tightly. "And you will do even greater things. But you must continue to trust yourself and me." For the first time, Ilara allowed herself to feel relief. And something deeper. A sense of belonging. She was no longer the forgotten Omega. She was claimed, protected, and powerful. And yet, the danger had not vanished. The shadows of the past, the curses of her birth, the enemies lurking beyond the castle walls, they all remained, waiting for the moment to strike. The next days were filled with preparation. Kael instructed her in courtly matters, in magic, and in self-defense. Every moment together deepened their bond, and Ilara began to understand the complexity of the man who had claimed her. Kael was not just a king or a warrior. He was a protector, a strategist, and, in his own guarded way, a man capable of feeling deeply. Ilara's own feelings grew, mingling with the trust and respect she had for him. She had feared him once, and still did, at times. But now that fear was tempered with admiration, curiosity, and a pull she could not resist. Kael, in turn, found himself drawn to her courage, her resilience, and the quiet fire that had always been within her, waiting to awaken. One evening, as the moon rose high over the castle, they stood together on the balcony, overlooking the misty kingdom. Kael's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through her body. "You are ready," he said softly. "The world may not understand you, but I do, and I will not let it harm you." Ilara looked up at him, her heart full. Kael's eyes softened, just for a moment, and then he turned his gaze outward, scanning the horizon. "We will face what comes," he said, "together." But even as they stood united, the shadows moved beyond the castle walls. Whispers of rebellion, envy, and dark magic stirred. Ilara's birth had left a mark, and some would seek to exploit it. The forgotten Omega had been claimed, yes, but the kingdom had not yet accepted her, and danger lingered like a storm on the horizon. The night was thick with mist, curling through the streets of Valthorn like living shadows. From the castle, Kael and Alara watched the kingdom below, their figures cloaked in the pale silver of moonlight. Danger had been growing steadily, the enemy from Kael's past, now bold enough to strike openly. They had spent days preparing, training, and uniting their powers, yet the weight of the impending confrontation pressed heavily on both of them. Alara stood close to Kael, her fingers brushing his, seeking strength in his presence. She had grown far beyond the forgotten girl who had been dismissed at the bonding ritual. She had learned to wield her magic, to trust her instincts, and to stand as a partner beside the Alpha King. And still, the uncertainty gnawed at her, the shadows of her birth, the rival who sought her power, and the fragile balance of trust and love that had taken root between them. Kael's voice broke the silence. Tonight, we end this. The one who wishes to use you, to exploit your power, will not succeed. You are mine, and I will protect you, as I have promised. Alara met his gaze, feeling both fear and courage intertwine. I'm ready, she whispered, the words steady, despite the pounding of her heart. We face it together. They descended through the castle's hidden passageways, moving silently toward the great hall where the intruder had been seen last. Shadows flickered in the corners, and the faint pulse of magic throbbed beneath Alara's skin. She could feel her power now, steady and strong, responding to her fear, her trust, and her determination. The great hall was empty, but the air felt charged with intent. Kael signaled for her to stay close, and together they advanced. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the shadows, the rival noble. His expression twisted in malice and triumph. So, the forgotten Omega, and her king, he sneered. You think yourselves safe? End quote. Alara felt her magic flare, a shield of silver light forming around them. Kael's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her, lending strength without diminishing her own. You are not welcome here, Kael said, his voice low, deadly calm. Leave now, or face the consequences. The noble laughed, a sound that echoed off the marble walls. Consequences? I think you underestimate me, Alpha King. She is mine to claim, by right of power. Alara's pulse quickened, but she did not falter. She focused, drawing on the currents of magic she had practiced for weeks. The room seemed to pulse with her energy, the shadows bending, flickering, and twisting in response. The noble stepped back, startled, as her power rose around her like a living shield. Kael's eyes met hers, and in that instant, no words were needed. Their bond, forged through trust, training, and shared vulnerability, radiated outward. The Alpha King and his Omega stood united, a force of strength and courage that the intruder had not anticipated. With a sudden surge, the noble attacked, aiming to disrupt their bond. Alara raised her hand, and the silver light shot forward, striking him with a force that drove him back. Kael moved with precision, intercepting his next move and disarming him. Together, they were unstoppable. The forgotten Omega and the Alpha King, a combination of raw power, strategy, and trust. As the intruder fell, the shadows around the room began to dissolve. The curse that had hovered over Alara since birth, sensing her readiness, had acknowledged her strength and receded. The danger had passed, at least for now, leaving the hall quiet except for the steady beat of their hearts. Alara leaned against Kael, trembling, her mind still racing with adrenaline and relief. I did it, she whispered. I protected us. Kael placed his hand on her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly against her skin. You did more than that, he said softly. You claimed your power, and you claimed yourself. No one can take that from you. For the first time, Alara felt complete. She was no longer the girl forgotten at the bonding ritual. She was seen, respected, and powerful. And more than that, she was bound to someone who understood her, protected her, and now loved her. Days passed, and the kingdom adjusted to the news that the forgotten Omega had been claimed and had proven herself in ways none had expected. The nobles who had whispered and doubted now watched her with quiet awe. The castle, once filled with suspicion and tension, began to feel alive with possibility and hope. Kael and Elara continued to strengthen their bond, not only through shared training and strategy, but through quiet moments of trust and intimacy. They walked in the gardens under the moonlight, spoke in hushed tones by candlelight, and learned each other's strengths and fears. Every glance, every touch deepened their connection, transforming their partnership from duty into something far more profound. One evening, Kael led her to the highest tower, where the stars shone bright against the endless sky. "Look," he said, lifting her hand toward the heavens. "The world is vast, and our bond makes it larger still. You are no longer forgotten, Elara. You are powerful, loved, and part of something greater than yourself." Elara gazed at the sky, the vastness overwhelming yet comforting. I never imagined this," she whispered. "That I could belong somewhere. That I could matter." Kael turned to her, his eyes soft yet intense. "You always mattered. You only had to see it yourself. And now, you are mine, as I am yours. We protect each other. We trust each other. Together, we are stronger than any curse, any shadow, any enemy." Her heart swelled with a mix of awe and love. She reached for him, and their hands intertwined, the bond between them palpable, radiant, and unbreakable. But even as they stood together, a gentle wind whispered through the tower, carrying faint traces of magic and memory. It reminded them both that the world of Vilethorn was never completely safe, that power always drew attention, and that challenges would come again. Yet, for the first time, they faced that knowledge not with fear, but with readiness. The Alpha King and his Omega had proven themselves. They had faced the shadows of the past, confronted enemies, and awakened powers hidden since birth. Their bond, forged in darkness, had become a source of light, a light that would guide them through whatever the kingdom or fate would throw at them. In the quiet that followed, Kael leaned close, his forehead resting lightly against hers. "We are ready," he whispered. "No one can take this from us. Not now. Not ever." Elara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his presence and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She had been forgotten once, overlooked and dismissed, but that time had ended. She had been claimed, trained, tested, and accepted. And in Kael's arms, she felt the truth of her own strength, her own worth, and the enduring power of love and trust. The moon rose higher, bathing the kingdom in silver light, and the castle stood as a testament to their bond. Outside, the mist lingered, but it no longer brought fear. Instead, it carried the promise of a future shaped by courage, unity, and the magic that flowed through them both. And somewhere, deep within the castle walls, the echoes of curses faded, replaced by a quiet pulse of life and hope. The forgotten Omega had become the center of the kingdom's destiny, bound to the Alpha King, powerful and unafraid.